right now, you should be keeping an eye on and prioritizing what's happening north of the border, even more so than what's going on overseas. With what's going on up there right now in regards to this convoy, and the fact that the Emergencies Act has been invoked by the federal government of Canada to try to combat some of these protests, you should be just as concerned about that as almost anything else, if not more than anything else that's going on right this second. We have to pay attention and start taking notes as to the activities of the federal government in the response to these protests in order to understand exactly what would happen here in the United States if the people finally said enough was enough and decided to have similar protests here, which there are other similar convoy-style protests scheduled to happen here in March of this year. And these are things we need to be concerned about and keeping an eye on, because with the federal overreach and the amount of power grabs that have happened over the last 2 years, people are losing more and more of their individuality and more of their rights. This Emergencies Act, which has been in place since 1988 and replaced the War Powers Act from before, it has never been used before. However, in the crisis, the global crisis of 2020, back in March of 2020, that was not big enough of a deal to invoke this act. During the riots and the protests, which also occurred in Canada in the summer of 2020, those were not big enough of a problem to invoke the Emergencies Act. But this convoy protest, which has been very peaceful in most ways, and all the footage coming out of it doesn't show anything similar to what we experienced here during the summer of 2020, that has risen to the occasion. And this should definitely tell you something about how federal authority will react to the people standing up for what they believe in, and how this could all go down is something we definitely need to be paying attention to. And I understand that anything that's happening up there could easily happen down here, and if our federal government gets involved with trying to help the government of Canada to quell these protests, things are just going to get worse. And all this does is actually add more fuel to the fire and give those protesters even more of a reason to stick around. And then this whole tension that's already building escalates even further. And how this all ends is something we have to pay attention to, and we have to understand could get worse due to the fact that this is already putting a strain on the supply chain. This is already raising the tensions that already pre-existed the convoy to begin with. And now we're seeing federal authorities start to clamp down in a way that it has not done before. So be prepared for these things to spread, and be prepared for any similar type of engagement to occur during any type of civil unrest or dispute with the government in our own country as well. And honestly, one of the best ways that you can prepare to avoid dealing with these situations, one of the best ways to make sure that any federal overreach or any martial law situation or Emergencies Act scenario can affect you at the least level that it possibly could, is to get out of an urban environment and get out of the places where they can more easily manage you as an individual. And I am teaming up with a company called fleethecity.com, whose main goal is to literally get people out of these major metropolitan areas and put them in rural environments. So go check out fleethecity.com. Make sure that you tell them Magic sent you if you try to interact with them over there or try to find out more information. But they have a lot of really good stuff going on. They'll try to help you find a homestead, property, a bug out location, or they're even building a community in northern Montana where people of a like mind are going to live together and have land that is adjacent to each other and have ways to actually build that mag that we all keep talking about here in the preparedness community. But these things are very important right now, because the understanding of all these other existential threats is a good thing to have. But to really keep an eye on what the immediate threat is the most important thing we can do. And right now that immediate threat seems to be coming from authority more so than anything else that we've been worried about for the last couple of decades. And here we are now watching as the federal government in Canada oversteps their bounds in many ways and unleashes power on the people in order to accomplish their goals, even if the justification doesn't exist. And the way this Emergencies Act worked is, the second it was invoked, the powers existed. Now, in 7 days, they have to at least prove to Parliament that there's a reason for it to exist. But during that time, they've got the power, and these things can definitely escalate and move quickly. And I don't think those convoy truckers are going anywhere. So keep an eye on it, understand what's happening, and understand that this is more important to you right this second than anything happening in Eastern Europe. That might affect us down the road a lot more than this whole situation is right now, but I'm telling you what, right now, this is what we have to be looking at. And I am just trying my best to stay away from the areas that are going to be affected by these things the most, but I'm also trying my best to become as self-sufficient as possible, because we can't rely on these people who are in charge of our livelihoods any longer, and we know that they are here to try to do as much damage as they can in the sense of individuality and freedom, so that way you and I both have to bend the knee at some point in time to get what it is we need just to survive on a basic level. And you know what? I'm not going to do that. I don't think you are either. So make sure you're one of the 5% or 1% or 0.5% of people who are actually going to do what they can to try to make it through these times. Because honestly, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And that's with me having a very optimistic outlook on the world. So that should tell you something. That's going to be it for Magic Prepper.